Greetings and welcome to our daily walk through the scripture for July the 16th. Your readings today find you in 1 Chronicles 24 and 25 and 26 all the way through verse 11, and also Romans chapter 4 verses 1 through 12, and Psalm 13 1 through 6, and lastly Proverbs 19 15 through 16. Now yesterday when we talked, we kind of had the question, and Paul left us with the question of, do we nullify the law by this faith? And then he makes the statement, not at all, rather we uphold the law. Okay, so then it goes on, you assume at that point to go, okay, well then at this point, Paul is now going to make his argument for why we uphold the law rather than nullify the law. And then he has a really weird segue in chapter 4, verses 1 through 12, because it seems like Paul begins to make the argument that the law is nullified. And he uses the example of Abraham being justified by faith. And Paul says, hey, if Abraham was justified by his works, which for the record, the law would be works, okay? That's the law, following the law would be being justified by works. If we're being justified by works, then he would have had something to boast about. But instead, Scripture says Abraham believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness. In other words, Abraham's faith was credited as righteousness, not Abraham's works. So even when Abraham went and obeyed God about potentially sacrificing his son, when Abraham went and left his homeland, when Abraham went to the promised land, when Abraham did all of these different things, those things were not what got him righteous. It was the faith that he did to do these things. It was the faith that he demonstrated to do these things. He was credited as righteous because of his faith. So then, hold on a minute here, Jeremy. Then it sounds like that we don't need the law. You're right. That's kind of what it starts to sound like. And then David says the same thing. Paul says in verse 6 here, he says, when he speaks of the blessedness of the one whom God credits as righteousness apart from works. Okay? So then, again, we seem to have this argument of the law is now no longer necessary. The works of the law, the things that we're supposed to do to obey the law, they're no longer necessary. They're no longer needed. Instead, we need to be credited as righteousness. And Paul goes on to talk about it when he talks about circumcision, and that circumcision was the sign of that, which now suddenly we have a new argument. Hold on a minute here. So if circumcision is the sign, the seal of righteousness, then shouldn't we all have to get circumcised? I thought we weren't supposed to be required to get circumcised anymore. I'm really confused here, Paul. You seem like you're arguing against yourself in all this. And it would seem that way. Except that in the following verses, we're going to find out that Paul is not only arguing that the law is, we are no longer under the law, but that we should still obey the law. You're like, what? Hold on, Jeremy. You see, here's where the difference is, and here's what I want you to start looking at as we read this, okay? Is why do we follow the law? This is the question that we need to be asking. Before, we followed the law because we had to follow the law, because we had nothing else. The law was what was supposed to make us righteous, okay? However, we know reality is the law. We can't be righteous because of the law. So now, though, as followers of Christ, why do we follow the law? Do we follow the law because we have to follow the law? Or do we follow the law because we get to follow the law? Because it is a witness. It is a sign of gratitude of the salvation that Jesus has brought. And these are the questions that Paul is posing, and this is the question that you need to be asking yourself as you read this, is why do we follow the law? Is it for salvation? Or is it for something else? Is it so that we can get into heaven? Or is it for something else? The world is going to tell you that you follow the rules so that you can be defined as a good person, and that as a good person, you will get into heaven. However, just as we saw yesterday, no one is good. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So Paul is coming at the question from a roundabout way. But you still need to be asking the question, why do we follow the law? Okay, and we'll explore some more of that in the coming days. See you next time.